6 months ago, I laid my husband to rest. Yesterday, I saw him buying groceries at the supermarket. I ran toward him, tears streaming down my face, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. He turned, looked at me with confusion written all across his features, and said in that familiar voice, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I think you have me confused with someone else." But everything was identical. The voice that had whispered good morning to me for 43 years. The marks on his face I'd traced with my fingers 1,000 times. Everything. Let me back up. Let me tell you how my world collapsed in the produce section of a grocery store. My heart literally stopped when I saw him. There, between the aisles of canned vegetables at the grocery store, was Daniel, my husband, the man I'd buried 6 months earlier in a bronze casket that cost $85,000. The man I'd wept for until my body had no tears left to give. The man who was supposed to be 6 feet under, but there he was, alive, breathing, holding a shopping basket, comparing prices on kidney beans. I dropped the jar of pasta sauce I was holding. Glass exploded across the tile floor, red sauce spreading like blood across the white surface. People stopped and stared. I didn't care. My legs moved on their own, carrying me down that aisle like I was 25 again, like time hadn't transformed my body into something slower, heavier, more cautious. "Daniel," I screamed, and my voice came out strange, twisted with a sob that erupted from somewhere deep in my chest. "Daniel, oh my God, you're alive." He turned, and when those hazel eyes met mine, I felt the entire world tilt sideways. It was him. The same scar above his right eyebrow from the time he crashed his brother's motorcycle at 19. The same slightly bent nose, broken in a construction accident he never liked talking about. The same small birthmark on his neck, barely visible, but one I knew as well as the lines on my own palm. I reached out, my arms extending, wanting to touch him, to hold him, to prove to myself this wasn't some cruel hallucination conjured by my grief-stricken mind. But he stepped backward. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said in that same rough voice I'd heard every morning for 4 decades. The voice that used to wake me gently, that argued with me about finances, that whispered he loved me on winter nights when we'd hold each other close. "I think you're mistaking me for someone else." "Mistaking you?" I couldn't breathe properly. "No, Daniel. It's me, Margaret, your wife." I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers, desperately scrolling through photos. I found one from his last birthday before the car accident. I shoved the screen toward his face, holding it too close. "Look, it's us. You don't recognize me?" He looked at the photograph. His eyes narrowed for just a moment, just one brief second, and then he shook his head with that gentle but firm movement I knew so intimately. "I'm sorry. My name is Stephen Carter. I've never seen this photo before in my life." He placed a hand on my shoulder, a brief, almost fatherly touch. "You must be going through something difficult. Maybe you should sit down somewhere, have some water." Stephen Carter. I watched him more carefully now. His clothes were different. Daniel always wore button-down shirts and khaki pants, even on weekends. This man wore a faded Chicago Bears t-shirt and old jeans with worn knees. His shoes were scuffed sneakers, not the brown leather shoes Daniel preferred. But the face, God, the face was absolutely identical. "Your hand," I whispered, pointing at his left side. "Show me your left hand." He frowned, clearly confused, but he raised his hand slowly. And there it was. The crooked ring finger, bent at an odd angle from when Daniel broke it at 16, trying to help his father repair their garage door. I felt my stomach twist into knots. "Look, ma'am, I really need to go," he said, already turning away from me. "I hope you feel better, but I'm really not who you think I am." He pushed his basket forward, moving down the aisle toward the checkout lanes. I stood there, shaking, as a store employee approached with a mop to clean up the broken jar. People walked past me, casting glances of pity or irritation. I should have left right then. I should have gone home and called a doctor. But something inside me, that voice that always warned me when something wasn't right, the same instinct I'd ignored too many times throughout my life, was screaming that this was no coincidence. So I followed him. I kept my distance, hiding behind shelving units and end cap displays like some kind of amateur detective. I watched him pay for his groceries with cash, declining the receipt when offered. I saw him exit the store and climb into an older white Honda Accord with a dented rear bumper. I memorized the license plate, JTK 4729. I rushed to my car, the silver Camry Daniel had bought me 3 years before he died, and I followed him through the city streets. My heart was pounding so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. We passed through downtown, through the neighborhood where we'd lived together, and continued westward toward an area I rarely visited. He parked in front of a modest house, painted pale yellow with a small front garden and a white wooden fence. An ordinary, anonymous house on an ordinary street. He got out, carrying his grocery bags, and then the front door opened before he reached it. A woman appeared, younger than me, maybe in her mid-50s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She smiled when she saw him. Not a polite neighbor's smile. A wife's smile. She kissed him on the lips, took one of his bags, and then 2 children burst through the doorway. A boy and a girl, maybe 9 and 11 years old. They jumped up at him, shouting, "Grandpa, Grandpa, did you remember the cookies?" "Grandpa," he laughed, that lopsided laugh I'd heard 10,000 times. They all disappeared inside the house together. The door closed behind them. I sat in my car, parked about 60 yards away as the afternoon sun streamed through my windshield, warming my face that was wet with tears I didn't even know I was crying. 43 years of marriage. 6 months of mourning. Entire nights spent weeping alone, clutching the pillow that still carried his scent. And he was here, alive, with another family, with grandchildren I never knew existed. I took out my phone and photographed the house, the car, the license plate. My hands were shaking so badly that most of the pictures came out blurry, but I managed a few clear shots. As daylight began fading, I started the car and drove home on complete autopilot. I don't remember the drive at all, only pulling into the garage and sitting in the darkness, staring at the photos on my phone, comparing them with old pictures of Daniel stored in my gallery. Every detail matched, every mark, every feature, every small imperfection. I went inside, into the large, empty house that Daniel had left me, or rather, that had been left to me when he supposedly died. I sat in the living room with all the lights off, and that's when a question shot through my mind like ice-cold lightning. If Daniel is alive, who the hell did we bury? I stayed awake the entire night, sitting at the kitchen table with only a small lamp for light. I spread out every photo I had of Daniel. Pictures from our wedding, him still young in that gray suit we'd rented because we couldn't afford to buy one. Photos of Thomas's birthdays, our son. Photos from vacations, backyard barbecues, Christmas mornings. And next to them, on my phone screen, the pictures I'd captured that afternoon. I zoomed in again. I compared every single inch. The scar above his eyebrow, identical. The shape of his left ear, slightly larger than the right, the same. The birthmark on his neck shaped like a tiny comma in exactly the same location. Even the way he smiled, showing more teeth on the right side, was absolutely identical. I found a magnifying glass I used for reading fine print on medication labels and examined an old photo of Daniel shirtless, taken at a beach in South Carolina about 12 years ago. There it was, the small dark mole near his collarbone. I zoomed in on the phone picture where Stephen was turning to grab a bag from his car. His shirt had ridden up slightly, the same mole. In the same place. Impossible. But twins wouldn't share birthmarks, would they? Scars aren't genetic. And that broken finger. I stood up, paced through the house, returned to the table. The wall clock read 4:35 in the morning. Outside, the city was still asleep, wrapped in that strange silence that exists only in the hours before dawn. I picked up our wedding album, ran my fingers over the fading images preserved behind plastic sheets. There was Daniel at 26, lean, smiling with that thin mustache he later shaved off. There I was at 23, wearing a simple ivory dress my mother had sewn by hand, my hair pinned up with baby's breath flowers. We were poor then. He worked as a clerk at a hardware supply store. I was a seamstress. We lived in a tiny apartment that barely fit a bed and a dresser, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. When Thomas was born 4 years later, things started improving. Daniel had real talent for sales and customer relations. Within 12 years, he'd gone from clerk to manager. Within 25 years, he owned 2 hardware supply stores across the city. Our life transformed. Our own house, a decent car, occasional vacations, but Daniel traveled constantly for work. 2-3 times every month. He'd be gone for 4, 5, sometimes 6 days at a time. Closing deals, he'd say, visiting suppliers and distributors, meeting with contractors. I never suspected anything. Why would I? He always came back exhausted, stressed, complaining about endless meetings and highway traffic. He brought gifts for me and Thomas. He'd say he missed us terribly. Now looking back through this new lens of horror, every single trip seemed like an elaborate, carefully constructed deception. When the sun finally rose, I was still sitting at that table, surrounded by photographs. I picked up my phone and called Thomas. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep and confusion. "Mom, it's 6:15 in the morning. Did something happen? Is everything okay? I need you to come over right now." "Now? Mom, I have a client meeting at 9. Thomas." My voice came out firm, loaded with something my son rarely heard from me. "Come now. It's about your father." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Mom, we've talked about this. You really need to consider seeing a therapist. This prolonged grief isn't healthy." "I saw your father yesterday." Another silence, longer this time. "Mom, what medications have you taken? Did you forget one of your prescriptions?" "Thomas, I saw your father, alive, at the grocery store. And I followed him to his house. I need you to come here right now and help me understand what's happening. Because either I'm losing my mind or something impossible is real. Stay there. Don't leave the house. Don't do anything else. I'm coming right now." He disconnected. I went to shower, changed my clothes. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Deep dark circles under my eyes, disheveled gray hair, chapped lips. I looked like I'd aged a decade overnight. Thomas arrived 35 minutes later, still wearing gym clothes. He must have rushed straight out of his house. He came in without knocking, found me back at the kitchen table. "Mom, what happened?" He pulled up a chair, sat close to me, took my hand. His eyes held that particular kind of worry children develop when they think their parents are losing touch with reality. I showed him the photographs. First the old ones, then the new ones, explaining every detail carefully. The scar, the birthmark, the broken finger. I told him about the encounter at the store, how this man treated me like a complete stranger. The false name, the house, the woman, the children, calling him Grandpa. Thomas looked at the photos in complete silence. His expression began changing gradually, from concern to confusion, from confusion to something I couldn't quite identify. His hands trembled slightly as he zoomed in on one particular picture. "Yeah, the resemblance is really striking," he said finally, handing my phone back. "But Mom, people look alike sometimes. I've seen at least 4 guys around town who could pass as my brothers." "Thomas, this isn't a resemblance. It's him. Mom, we buried Dad. You were there. I was there. Jennifer, the cousins, his friends, everyone was there. A closed casket," I whispered. "We buried a closed casket." Thomas ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted. "Because the body was, the accident was severe. The medical examiner said it was better that way, that you shouldn't see him in that condition." "Did you see him? Did you see your father's body with your own eyes?" Thomas looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "No, but all the paperwork was there. The medical examiner's office released the body. There was an official death certificate. Everything was legally in order. I want to go to that house, I said, standing up. Right now. You're coming with me. Mom, this is insane. We can't just show up at a stranger's house. So you think he's a stranger? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw doubt creeping in. I think you're traumatized, Mom. You've suffered tremendously. You're still suffering, and the brain, when it's trapped in deep grief, can create powerful illusions. Thomas Michael Anderson. I used his full name like I did when he was a child, caught doing something wrong. Are you coming with me to that house, or am I going alone? Because I am absolutely going. He sighed, defeated. Okay, let's go. But only so you can see it's someone else, and you can start moving forward. Okay? We left in his car, a newer black Honda Civic. The morning traffic was already building. Thomas drove in tense silence, his jaw clenched tight. I gave him directions, turn by turn. When we reached the street with the pale yellow house, I told him to park a short distance away. That one, I pointed. Right there. The white Accord was sitting in the driveway. A light glowed in what looked like the kitchen window. We could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Thomas stared at the house, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel, something he'd done since childhood when he was nervous. Do you want me to go knock? I asked. No, wait. We sat there for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Then the front door opened. Stephen came out wearing navy blue work coveralls, carrying a metal toolbox. He walked to the Accord. Thomas turned absolutely pale. Honey, are you all right? He didn't answer, just stared intensely at the man getting into the car. The Accord backed out of the driveway, passed directly by us, close enough that I could see his face clearly through the window. Daniel. It was Daniel, older, more tired-looking, but unmistakably him. The car turned the corner and disappeared. When I looked at Thomas, I saw tears streaming silently down his face. Thomas. My stomach turned to solid ice. Thomas, what aren't you telling me? He rested his forehead against the steering wheel, his shoulders beginning to shake. Mom. His voice came out broken, fractured. Mom, I'm so sorry. And in that moment, as the morning sun illuminated the car's interior, and my son fell apart beside me, I knew that what I was about to discover would destroy much more than just my marriage. It would destroy my entire family, every memory, every moment I'd believed was real. Talk, I ordered, and my voice came out hard as granite. Talk right now, Thomas. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, taking several deep breaths, trying desperately to compose himself, but the tears kept falling like rain. Mom, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. You were never supposed to find out. A cold sensation spread through my entire chest, like ice water in my veins. Find out what? Thomas lifted his head, looked at me with those brown eyes he'd inherited from his father, eyes that now carried guilt, fear, and shame. Dad didn't die in that accident. The words hung suspended in the air between us. Simple, direct, absolutely devastating. I already knew, somewhere deep down. From the moment I saw him in the store, I knew. But hearing my son confirm it felt like being probed in the stomach by someone you trust. Go on, I whispered. He had this other family, Mom, for 22 years. That woman, Diane, her 2 kids who now have kids of their own. He was living a complete double life, splitting his time between you two for over 2 decades. 22 years of lies. I thought of all those business trips, all the nights he didn't come home, all the weekends working late, all of Thomas's birthdays he missed because he was supposedly closing an important deal. And you knew? I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way he couldn't meet my eyes. I found out about 4 years ago. He ran a hand through his hair nervously. It was completely by accident. I was helping Dad organize some financial papers from the stores, and I found receipts. Duplicate purchases, payments for utilities and groceries for 2 separate households. I confronted him immediately. And what did he say? That he loved you, Mom, that he never wanted to hurt you, but that he loved Diane too, that he'd met her on a business trip to Milwaukee, that it was something that just happened. And then he couldn't bring himself to leave her. He said he tried ending it several times over the years, but he couldn't go through with it. I laughed. A bitter, completely humorless sound. How convenient. The poor man couldn't leave his mistress. Mom? And you? I turned to face him fully, feeling anger rise in me for the first time. You found out, and what? You just accepted it? You kept his secret? He begged me to, Mom. Thomas's voice rose in desperation. He said if you found out, it would destroy everything. That you'd be entitled to half the stores, the house, everything. He said he needed time to figure things out, to protect his business assets. You mean his money? I corrected sharply. Thomas lowered his head. I didn't know what to do. He's my father, Mom. And honestly, in a way, I didn't want everything to be destroyed either. The stores, the business he'd built, which would eventually be mine one day. So that was it. Greed, pure and simple greed. Tell me everything, I ordered. From the very beginning, I want to know every single detail of this fraud. Thomas took a deep breath, wiped his face again with his sleeve. 6 months ago, Dad came to me. He said he couldn't stand living this double life anymore, that he wanted to be with Diane permanently, to start fresh with just her and her family. But if he asked for a divorce, I'd get half of everything. I completed the thought, feeling physically ill. He'd consulted an attorney, community property state, married for over 40 years. You were entitled to half the stores, the house, the savings, the retirement accounts. About $2.3 million. Maybe more. $2.3 million. 43 years of marriage were worth $2.3 million that he didn't want to share with me. So you planned his death. It wasn't exactly like that. He had the idea. He said he knew someone, a homeless man who was terminally ill with cancer. No family to speak of. The man was literally dying, Mom. A matter of weeks at most. Dad offered him money. Substantial money. $45,000 for the man's only niece who lived out of state and never visited him. The money would be transferred after he died. I felt like I might actually vomit. You bought a body. The man was dying anyway, Thomas defended weakly. He accepted the offer, said at least his niece would have a better life with that money. And the accident was staged. Dad drove to that small town, Cedar Falls, like he'd done many times before for business. But this time the man, his name was Anthony, was with him. They caused a real car accident, but carefully controlled. Just enough impact to require police response and an ambulance. Anthony was taken to the hospital under Dad's name. He had all of Dad's documents, his wallet, his driver's license, his insurance cards, everything. And when he died 4 days later from the cancer, they issued the death certificate as Daniel Richard Anderson. Yes, the body arrived in a sealed casket because it was supposedly disfigured from the accident and subsequent medical interventions. And I insisted you not open it, Mom, because his voice broke. Because inside was the corpse of a complete stranger. Thomas nodded, looking completely ashamed. I sat in silence, processing all of this, remembering those terrible days. The phone call from the police, the frantic drive to the hospital in Cedar Falls. Thomas stopping me from entering the hospital room, saying the doctors strongly recommended against viewing the body, that the sight would be too traumatic for me. I remembered the funeral, the closed bronze casket covered in white lilies, Daniel's favorite. People crying, embracing. Daniel's friends and business associates offering condolences. The minister talking about life's brevity, about the legacy we leave behind. And the entire time Daniel was alive somewhere, planning his new life, abandoning me as if our 43 years together meant absolutely nothing. And the burial plot? My voice came out strange, distant. The bronze casket that cost $85,000? Mom, there is a body buried there. The man who died. He was interred as Daniel R. Anderson with his documents, his legal identity. And Daniel took half the money we'd saved for emergencies. About 1.7 million that was in investment accounts primarily under his name. He transferred everything just days before the staged accident. Moved to a new city, created a new identity. Stephen Carter. Started a completely new life with Diane, with grandchildren I never knew existed. With his other family. Yes. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, tried not to scream, not to hit something, not to completely break down. And you? I opened my eyes, stared directly at my son. What did you get out of this entire scheme? Thomas swallowed hard, looking sick. The stores. Both of them. As the sole heir, they automatically transferred to me, plus the house, which was already in my name for the last few years for estate planning purposes. How much are the stores worth, Thomas? Exactly how much? About 3.1 million. But I've already sold one of them. I kept the larger location on Hamilton Avenue. I invested the money from the sale, so you profited from this. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I took care of you, Mom. I set up a monthly allowance. Of how much? $1,400. I laughed. A loud, almost hysterical laugh that echoed in the car. $1,400. Less than a housekeeper earns. While you got $3 million, your father ran off with nearly $2 million. And I was left here crying every single night, taking sleeping pills just to get through the darkness, attending a support group for widows. The tears finally came, hot, bitter, filled with rage. I mourned him, Thomas. I cried until I physically couldn't breathe. I'd look at his photograph on the nightstand and beg God to take me too, because I couldn't bear the pain of existing without him. Mom, I'm so sorry. And you knew, I screamed, finally losing all control. You knew everything, and you let me suffer. You let me spend $85,000 on a burial plot for a complete stranger. You let me believe my husband was dead while he was alive and happy with another family. I didn't know what to do. He's my father. And I'm your mother. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy enough to crush us both. Thomas was crying openly now, but I felt absolutely no pity. I felt only an icy, controlled rage growing in my chest like a gathering storm. Take me home, I said with eerie calm. Mom, we need to talk about... Take me home. He drove in complete silence. When we arrived, I got out of the car without looking back at him. Mom, please. I slammed the door and went inside, not turning around once. I went straight to the bedroom, gathered every photograph of Daniel, and put them in a cardboard box. 43 years of memories. Wedding photos, birthdays, vacations, smiles, embraces, all lies. Every single moment. I closed the box and shoved it onto the highest shelf in the closet where I wouldn't have to see it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at everything. The big empty house, the empty life, the last 6 months of completely wasted grief. And I started to plan, because if there was one thing my 67 years of life had taught me, it was this. You can't truly trust anyone. Not your husband, not your son, only yourself. And I was going to make them both pay, each in their own way. But first, I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof that couldn't be ignored, dismissed, or explained away. Proof that would completely destroy the perfect little life they'd built on the foundation of my tears and my pain. For the next 4 days, I didn't answer any of Thomas's calls. He called 53 times, sent 71 text messages, showed up at my front door twice, ringing the bell persistently for minutes at a time. I watched him through the bedroom window, but I didn't open the door. I didn't want to see his face. Not yet. Because I needed time to think clearly, to plan carefully, and most importantly, to bury what remained of the naive Margaret and replace her with someone much stronger. On the 5th day, I woke up different. Changed. I took a long, hot shower, got dressed in proper clothes, put on lipstick for the first time in months, grabbed my purse and left the house with purpose. My neighbor, Mrs. Richardson, was watering her flower garden. Good morning, Margaret. You look lovely today. She smiled, genuinely surprised. It had been a very long time since she'd seen me dressed up and put together. "Good morning, Alice. I'm just going to take care of some important business." I smiled back, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I drove to the downtown area. I had researched online and found exactly what I was looking for. Brennan Investigations. The office was located in an older building, 4th floor, Suite 407. I took the stairs because the elevator looked questionable, and knocked firmly on the frosted glass door with the name painted in fading gold letters. "Come in," a gruff voice answered from inside. The office was small, cramped, smelling distinctly of old coffee and cigarette smoke despite the no-smoking laws. Behind a desk piled high with file folders sat a man in his mid-60s, mostly bald, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked at me over his reading glasses. "Can I help you?" "I need to hire your services," I said, sitting in the chair across from him without waiting for an invitation. He leaned back in his squeaky chair, sizing me up carefully. I knew what he saw. A gray-haired woman, well-dressed, wearing discreet jewelry, someone with money. What kind of service are we talking about? An investigation on a specific person. I took out my phone, showed him the picture of Stephen I'd taken. "I need to know absolutely everything about this man. Where he lives, where he works, who he associates with, how much money he has access to. Everything." Brennan took my phone, enlarged the photo, studied it carefully. "Cheating husband? Ex-husband who's supposed to be dead. That definitely got his attention." He leaned forward, interested now. "That's an interesting story. Go on." I told him. Not everything, but enough. The car accident, the funeral, the chance encounter at the grocery store, the other family. I didn't mention Thomas's involvement. Not yet. I would save that information to play at exactly the right moment. Brennan listened in complete silence, making occasional notes in an old spiral notepad. "And you want proof," he concluded when I finished. "I want everything. Documents, photographs, recordings if possible. I need something that is absolutely undeniable. This is going to cost you, for a job of this level and complexity, $9,000. Half now, half when I deliver the complete report." I opened my purse, took out my checkbook, filled one out for $4,500, and handed it to him without hesitation. "I want results within 1 week." Brennan smiled, showing coffee-stained teeth. "You're a direct woman." "I appreciate that." He folded the check and put it in his shirt pocket. "I'll need some information from you. His full name, any documents you have, anything that might help. His real name is Daniel Richard Anderson. The false identity is Stephen Carter." I wrote down all the details on a piece of paper: the address of the pale yellow house, the license plate of the white Accord, the approximate times he left for work each morning. "Excellent. This is plenty to start with. I'll begin today. I'll call you if I find anything significant." I left the office feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time: purpose, direction, control. In the following days, I returned to that street repeatedly, always at different times, wearing hats or scarves to disguise my appearance. I watched their routine carefully, taking mental notes. Stephen left every morning at 7, driving the old Accord. He returned around 6 each evening. On Saturdays, he stayed home, playing with his grandchildren in the small backyard. On Sundays, they all attended the 10 o'clock service at the neighborhood church. The perfect life. The happy family. While I, the legal wife, had cried alone in the darkness for 6 months. Diane appeared to be a homemaker. She didn't work outside the house. She took care of the home, watched the grandchildren when her daughters were working. She was attractive for her age, well kept, carefully maintained. She wore simple but clean clothes. She smiled frequently. I hated her with an intensity that surprised me. 1 week later, Brennan called. "I have the full report. You can come pick it up whenever you're ready." I was at his office within 15 minutes. He handed me a thick manila folder, bulging with documents. "Sit down," he said seriously. "You're really gonna want to be sitting for this." I opened the folder slowly. The first page was a copy of Stephen Carter's birth certificate. Date of issue, 8 years ago. Registered in a small county clerk's office in a different state. It's fake, Brennan explained. A good forgery, but definitely fake. The original certificate for that name and date belongs to an infant who died in the 1960s. Your husband purchased the identity. I turned the page. Multiple photographs of Daniel entering and leaving a small automotive shop with a hand-painted sign above the door. Carter's Lock and Key Service. He works there, Brennan continued. He's a locksmith, makes about $2,800 per month. Simple, modest lifestyle. Nothing flashy. And the money? I asked. The $1.7 million he took? Brennan turned to another section of the folder, thick with bank statements. This is where it gets really interesting. 8 years ago, a Stephen Carter opened accounts at 4 different banks, with initial deposits totaling $1.6 million. Since then, he's been withdrawing about $7,000 per month, leaving the remainder in conservative, low-risk investment funds. So the money was still there. The money that was legally half mine. There's more. Brennan turned another page. I managed to access his phone records from the last 7 months. My heart sped up noticeably. Multiple calls to the same number. About 230 calls in total, some lasting over an hour. He circled a number with a red pen. Did you identify whose number it is? I asked, though something deep in my gut already knew the answer. Brennan looked at me with serious eyes. It's your son, Thomas Daniel Anderson. There it was, printed in black and white, proof of the double betrayal. Phone calls before the accident. Calls during the 6 months I spent in mourning. Calls just last week after I'd confronted Thomas. They talk regularly, Brennan said quietly. Before, during, and after the staged death. Your son was involved from the very beginning, Mrs. Anderson. I felt my hands begin to tremble. I closed the folder carefully. Anything else? Yes. The house they're living in isn't in Stephen's name. It's in Diane's name, purchased 19 years ago. They have 1 biological son together, age 21, who lives in Boston. Plus 3 grandchildren from her 2 daughters from a previous relationship. So he really did build an entire separate life. For over 20 years. Appears that way. And from what I could gather through various sources, Diane doesn't know he was married before. To her knowledge, Stephen Carter has always been Stephen Carter, a widower he met at a conference out of state. I took the folder, placed it carefully in my purse. How much do I owe you? The remaining balance? $4,500. I wrote the check immediately. As I handed it to him, Brennan held my hand gently. Look, I normally don't get personally involved in these cases, but you seem like a decent person who's been treated terribly. Whatever you're planning to do with this information, think very carefully. These kinds of cases, document fraud, staged death, identity theft, that's serious federal crime territory. Prison time. You understand what I'm saying? I understand perfectly, I said, smiling genuinely for the first time since discovering the truth. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Brennan. But I know exactly what I'm going to do. I left the office clutching that folder, as if it were the most precious thing in the entire world. Because it was. It was the key to completely destroying the lives of the 2 men who had systematically destroyed mine. At home, I spread all the documents across the living room table, like pieces of a puzzle. Photographs, bank statements, call logs, fake certificates. I read everything carefully, memorizing every single detail. Then I picked up my phone and made a call I had been postponing. Law offices of Rebecca Morrison. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'd like to schedule an appointment with Ms. Morrison. It's extremely urgent. Are you currently a client, ma'am? No, but I have a case involving fraud, document forgery, and embezzlement that I believe will interest her very much. A brief pause on the other end. Can you come tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon? I'll be there. I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep pink. A beautiful, peaceful evening. The last peaceful evening Daniel and Thomas would have for a very, very long time, because the storm was just beginning, and I was going to be the lightning that destroyed everything they'd built. Rebecca Morrison was not what I expected. When I entered her office, a sleek, modern space on the 9th floor of a downtown high-rise, I found a woman in her early 40s, with sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun, wearing a charcoal gray suit that radiated confidence and competence. Her eyes were intelligent, penetrating, the kind that didn't miss a single detail. "Mrs. Anderson," she extended her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Please, have a seat." I sat in the leather chair across from her polished desk. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the entire city spread out below. Down there, people were living their normal lives, completely unaware of the dramas unfolding in the offices above them. "Coffee? Water? Anything?" "No thank you. I'll get straight to the point." Rebecca settled into her chair, folded her hands on the desk. "My assistant mentioned you have a case involving fraud and forgery. Tell me about it." I placed Brennan's folder on the table and began speaking. I told her everything from the very beginning. The 43 years of marriage, Daniel's constant business travel, the second family that existed for over 20 years, the staged car accident, the purchased body, the funeral where I genuinely wept while my husband was alive and well, the son who knew everything and deliberately hid it, the millions that were siphoned away, the meager allowance they gave me as if it were charity. Rebecca listened without interrupting once, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she opened the folder and began examining the documents. It took her nearly 25 minutes, reading each page with intense concentration. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Anderson, this is explosive." "I know. Do you understand the full gravity of what has happened here? We're talking about multiple serious crimes." She began ticking them off on her fingers. "Identity fraud, embezzlement, concealment of a death, document forgery, tax evasion. Your husband and your son could each get 4 to 10 years in prison." I felt a cold satisfaction spread through my chest. "Good." She looked at me carefully, appraising. "You want to press criminal charges against both of them." "I want justice. I want every single penny that was stolen from me returned. I want them to pay for what they did to me." "Then we need to build an absolutely airtight case." Rebecca picked up her pen. "I'll need several things from you. First, your marriage documents and certificate. The fraudulent death certificate. Documents related to the stores and businesses. I have everything at home. I can bring it all tomorrow morning. Second, a confession would be ideal. You mentioned your son confessed to you. Do you have any recording of that conversation?" My stomach sank. "No, it happened in his car. I wasn't expecting it, so I wasn't prepared." "All right, we'll need to get him to confess again, but this time with it recorded properly." "How do we do that?" Rebecca smiled, a smile from someone who had clearly done this many times before. "Leave that to me. But first, let's talk about the money and assets. You said your son acquired the stores after the supposed death? 2 stores valued at about $3.1 million total. He's already sold one of them. And where is that money now?" "I don't know exactly. Invested somewhere, according to him." "We'll find out. Because under community property law, even with your husband's supposed death, you were entitled to 50% of everything built during the marriage. That absolutely includes those stores." But he was named the sole heir to a man who isn't actually dead. Rebecca leaned forward intently. "Mrs. Anderson, your husband didn't die. Therefore, there was no legitimate inheritance. The stores should never have transferred to your son. They still belong to the marital estate." It took me several seconds to fully process this. "So, my son sold property that wasn't legally his to sell? That is textbook embezzlement, and all the money from those sales needs to be returned to the estate for proper division." The full magnitude of the situation began dawning on me. How much? How much could I potentially recover? Rebecca took out a calculator and started running numbers. The store's $3.1 million, half is yours, that's $1.55 million, plus the $1.7 million your husband took, half is yours, that's $850,000, plus punitive damages for fraud and emotional distress, we can easily request $500,000. She looked up at me. We're talking about roughly $2.9 million, Mrs. Anderson, plus the house if you want to keep it. $2.9 million. 43 years of marriage, of dedication, of being a loyal wife and devoted mother were worth $2.9 million they had stolen from me. And the prison time? I asked quietly. The criminal case is a separate legal process, but with the evidence we have here, she tapped the folder, I'd estimate we have an 85 to 90% chance of conviction, especially with the recorded confession we're going to obtain. How exactly are we going to get that? Rebecca opened a drawer and took out a small digital recording device, barely larger than a USB drive. You're going to invite your son to lunch somewhere public. You're going to tell him you want to make peace, that you understand he was in a difficult position. You're going to make him feel comfortable and safe. And then, very naturally, you're going to guide the conversation back to what happened. Get him to repeat the confession in detail. All of this, she held up the recorder, will be captured perfectly. He won't suspect anything, not if you're a convincing actress. And from the look on your face right now, Mrs. Anderson, I think you've spent the last 6 months being an absolutely excellent actress. She was right. How many times had I smiled when I wanted to scream? How many times had I pretended to be fine when I was completely falling apart inside? There's one more thing, Rebecca said, her tone becoming more serious. We need documentary evidence of your son's transactions. The sale of the stores, bank transfers, where he deposited the money. He probably keeps those documents somewhere secure. He has an office at the store he kept, the one on Hamilton Avenue. Can you get access to that office? I thought about it carefully. Thomas had given me a copy of the key to the store years ago for emergencies. I'd never used it, but I still had it somewhere. I can get in. Excellent. Because if we can obtain those documents, proving he forged signatures and sold properties fraudulently. She slapped her hand on the desk with satisfaction. It's completely over. He'll have no possible defense. I left Rebecca's office 2 hours later with a detailed plan. A plan that would systematically destroy my son's entire life. And for the first time since discovering the truth, I didn't feel guilt or hesitation. I felt power. That night, I finally answered one of Thomas's 89 phone calls. Mom, thank God. I was so worried. I thought something might have happened to you. Thomas, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and controlled. Can we talk? A surprised silence on the other end. Of course, Mom. Of course we can talk. Do you want me to come over there? No. I want to have lunch with you tomorrow. At the Harbor Grill. That restaurant you like? Noon. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I'll be there, Mom. Until tomorrow, son. I hung up before he could say anything else. I went to my bedroom, opened the dresser drawer where I kept important items. There, at the very bottom under old scarves, was the key to the store. I picked it up, felt the cold weight of the metal in my palm. Tomorrow, during lunch with Thomas, while he confessed everything again, thinking I was forgiving him, believing I was being the understanding mother I had always been, Rebecca would be at the store with proper authorization, collecting every document, every piece of evidence, every shred of proof of his betrayal. And after lunch, when I had the recording and she had the documents, we would present everything to the district attorney's office. Thomas would be arrested within 72 hours. Daniel, or Stephen, or whatever name he was using, would be exposed, would lose everything, and would have to return every cent he stole from me, with substantial interest. And I would finally have what I deserved from the very beginning. Respect. Justice. My life back. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was no longer the Margaret who had cried for 6 months straight. She was no longer the naive wife who believed every lie. She was someone new, someone much stronger, someone who would show no mercy. The Harbor Grill was located on the top floor of a waterfront hotel with stunning panoramic views of the bay. I arrived 12 minutes early, wearing a conservative navy dress and the pearl necklace Daniel had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary. Ironic, wearing that necklace today of all days. The digital recorder was in my purse, already activated. Rebecca had instructed me to leave the purse open on the table, positioned as close to Thomas as possible. The device was highly sensitive and would capture everything clearly. Thomas arrived 7 minutes later, looking completely exhausted. Deep dark circles under his eyes, unshaven face, his dress shirt wrinkled and untucked. He saw me and practically ran to the table. "Mom," his voice was thick with emotion. I allowed it, but without any warmth, a quick, formal hug. We sat down. The waiter brought menus. I ordered grilled salmon that I had absolutely no intention of eating. Thomas ordered a steak, but from the way he was nervously fidgeting with his napkin, he clearly had no appetite either. "Mom, I don't even know where to begin." "Then don't," I said, taking a slow sip of water. "Let me speak first." He nodded eagerly, desperately. "I've spent the last several days thinking extensively about everything you told me. About your father, about the choices you both made." I paused deliberately, choosing my words with extreme care. "And I understand that you were in an impossible position." I saw genuine surprise flash across his face. "Mom." "Let me finish, Thomas. Your father is a manipulator. He always has been. He put you in a situation where you had to choose between him and me, between protecting the family's financial assets or telling me the devastating truth." I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to sound conciliatory and understanding. "You were the son. It wasn't your responsibility to fix the terrible mess he created." Thomas started crying, thick tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to tell you, Mom. Every single day, I wanted to tell you. But I was terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of destroying everything." "I know." I reached across the table, took his hand gently. The touch repulsed me deeply, but I kept my expression soft and forgiving. "But now I need to understand some things more clearly. I need you to tell me everything again, from the very beginning, because only then will I be able to truly process it, and maybe, eventually, forgive." He squeezed my hand, desperate for this chance at redemption I appeared to be offering. "Anything, Mom? Ask me anything at all. When exactly did your father first approach you with this plan?" "About 8 months before the fake accident happened. He came to the house late one night. Asked if we could talk privately. Said he couldn't stand living this double life anymore. That he wanted to be with Diane exclusively." "And he told you about her then?" "No, I already knew about her by that point. I'd found out about 3 years earlier. Remember I mentioned that? But that particular night, he said he wanted to make it official, to file for divorce. Except I convinced him not to." Thomas looked down, clearly ashamed. "I showed him the numbers, Mom. How much you would be legally entitled to. Half of everything." He completely panicked. The stores were his entire life. He'd built them from absolutely nothing. "With my support," I reminded him, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "With my work, too. While he was running the business and traveling constantly, who do you think raised you? Who took care of our home? Who gave up her own career as a seamstress so he could work late nights?" "I know, Mom. I know all of that." He wiped his face with the napkin. But in that moment, all I could think about was that we were going to lose everything, that years and years of work would be destroyed. "So you suggested the fake death?" "No, it wasn't my idea. It was completely his. He had the idea fully formed. He said he knew this person, a homeless man dying of terminal cancer, who had no one in his life. He would give $50,000 to the man's only niece if he agreed to die as Daniel Richard Anderson. The waiter brought our plates. We waited in tense silence until he left. Thomas didn't even glance at his food. "And you thought this was a reasonable idea?" I asked carefully. I thought it was absolutely insane at first, but Dad is incredibly persuasive. You know that about him. He said it would be perfect, that no one would ever suspect, that you would get the house and a comfortable allowance, that I would get the stores to secure your financial future too. What comfortable allowance, Thomas? $1,400? He swallowed hard, looking sick. I wanted to give you more, Mom. I really did. But the stores were having serious cash flow problems. I had to sell one just to pay off massive debts that Dad had hidden from everyone. Debts? What debts? Suppliers, back taxes, defaulted loans. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and overwhelmed. Dad was an excellent salesman, but a terrible financial manager. When I took full control, I discovered there was almost $750,000 in debt he'd never mentioned to anyone. So Daniel wasn't just a traitor and a liar. He was financially incompetent too. And where is the money from that store sale now? I paid off all the debts first. The rest, about $1.3 million, is invested in various funds. I was saving it for you eventually. A complete lie, but I let it pass without comment. Tell me about the day of the accident. How exactly did it happen? Thomas took a shaky breath, diving into the painful memory. Dad traveled like he always did, to that town, Cedar Falls. The man, Anthony, was already waiting at a predetermined location. They caused a real but carefully controlled car accident. They deliberately hit a tree on a quiet rural road, then called for an ambulance. When Anthony arrived at the hospital, he had all of Dad's documents. His ID, driver's license, health insurance card, absolutely everything. And no one suspected anything was wrong. Because his face was injured from the accident. Yes, and he was semi-conscious, not speaking clearly at all. The doctors were focused on trying to stabilize him. 4 days later, he died from the cancer, and they issued an official death certificate as Daniel R. Anderson. And you went to collect the body? Yes, I went personally. It came in the hearse straight to the funeral home. I insisted the casket remain sealed because, well, you know why now. Because inside was a complete stranger. Thomas nodded miserably. And your father? Where was he during the funeral? He'd already left town by then. He took a bus to Chicago, then transferred to another bus heading here. He stayed in a cheap motel for several days, waiting for everything to settle down and the news to spread. Then he rented the house where he lives now. Started working as a locksmith under his new identity. Simple life, staying under the radar. With the money he stole from me. Mom, it was $1.7 million. Money that was also legally mine, Thomas. My money. My voice was getting harder despite my best efforts. But I forced myself to maintain control. I couldn't lose my composure now. Where is that money currently? In bank accounts under the name Stephen Carter. 4 different banks. Conservative investment funds. He withdraws about $7,000 per month to supplement his locksmith income. Exactly what Brennan had discovered. Do you still maintain contact with him? Yes. Thomas lowered his voice instinctively. He calls me every week, asks about you, how you're coping with everything. I think he still cares about you, you know. I laughed bitterly. Cares, Thomas? He abandoned me believing he was dead. He let me cry over an empty grave. He let me spend $85,000 on a burial plot for a complete stranger. That's not caring. That's pure cowardice. I know. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I know, Mom. And I'm so sorry. If I could go back and change everything. But you can't. I pulled my hand away from his. Neither of you can. A heavy, suffocating silence fell between us. What are you going to do? He finally asked, real fear evident in his voice. I looked at him carefully. My son. The baby boy I had carried for 9 months. Who I had nursed. Who I had cared for through every childhood illness. Who I had helped with homework. Who I had comforted after his first heartbreak. The man who had betrayed me as deeply and completely as his father had. I don't know yet, I lied smoothly. But I need time alone to think everything through carefully. How much time? As much as it takes. I stood up, carefully grabbing my purse, making absolutely certain the recorder had captured every single word. "Mom, wait, please." "Goodbye, Thomas." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back once, leaving him sitting alone with his untouched food and the crushing guilt that he now carried entirely by himself. In the car, I allowed myself one moment, a single moment of genuine pain. Because no matter how many times I told myself he deserved everything that was coming, that they had used me, that they deserved to pay dearly, he was still my son. And a part of me was dying, having to destroy him like this. But the larger part, the part that had spent 6 months in fraudulent mourning, the part that had been treated like a complete fool for 43 years, that part felt deeply satisfied. I called Rebecca immediately. "I have the recording, everything, perfect. And I have all the documents from the store. You won't believe what I found, Margaret. Tell me, your son forged your signature on at least 17 different documents. Sales contracts, transfers, powers of attorney, all completely fraudulent. He didn't even attempt to disguise it well. And is that sufficient to prosecute him criminally and win?" "Absolutely. I'm preparing the formal complaint right now. I'll file it with the district attorney's office first thing tomorrow morning." "And how long until he's arrested?" 72 hours maximum. The judge who typically handles these cases is known for having absolutely zero tolerance for financial fraud against elderly victims. Your son will be in a jail cell before this week is over. I closed my eyes, resting my head against the steering wheel. And Daniel? Technically, he can't be arrested under that name, because legally, Daniel Anderson is deceased. But I can file an emergency motion to invalidate all of Stephen Carter's identity documents, freeze his bank accounts immediately, and force him to return everything that's rightfully yours with substantial interest and penalties. He'll be left with absolutely nothing, Margaret. He'll have to start completely over at 71 years old. 71. The same age he would be if he hadn't supposedly died at 68. "Do it," I said firmly, opening my eyes. "Do everything. File everything. Are you absolutely certain? Because once we start this process, there is no going back." I thought about the 43 years, the lies, the fake grief, the 6 months crying alone in the darkness, the insulting allowance, the second family he had chosen instead of ours. "Absolutely certain. Then tomorrow, the war begins. Prepare yourself, Margaret. It's going to get extremely ugly. Let it." I hung up and drove home slowly, carefully. That night I slept peacefully for the first time in 6 months, without needing any medication, because finally, after so long being the victim, I had become the hunter. And the hunt had only just begun. The formal complaint was filed on a Wednesday morning at 8:45. Rebecca called to confirm. "It's done. The district attorney's office has accepted the case. The prosecutor assigned is ADA Jennifer Hayes, known for being absolutely relentless in cases involving crimes against elderly victims. She's already requested an arrest warrant for Thomas." "How long until the warrant is actually issued?" 48 hours at most. She argued risk of flight and potential destruction of evidence. "The judge will approve it." 3 hours later, I received a call from Thomas. I ignored it completely. He called 6 more times that afternoon, sent multiple desperate text messages. "Mom, I need to talk to you urgently. Something serious has happened. Mom, please pick up the phone, please." I blocked his number because I knew exactly what had happened. Rebecca had warned me that the DA's office would send formal notification to all parties involved. Thomas had received the summons, knew he was under criminal investigation, and must have been absolutely panicking. On Thursday morning, he showed up at my front door. He pounded on it relentlessly, shouted my name over and over. The neighbors started peering out their windows, concerned. Mrs. Richardson came out onto her porch, looking worried. "Margaret, is everything all right over there?" I opened the bedroom window. "It's fine, Alice. Just a family disagreement. It'll be resolved very soon." Thomas saw me at the window. Mom, Mom, for the love of God, please open this door. Go away, Thomas. Did you do this? Did you actually report me to the authorities? Go away. I'm your son. Your only son. My son died along with my husband, I shouted back, and the pain in my voice was absolutely real. 6 months ago. What's left is a stranger who robbed me blind. I closed the window firmly. He stayed for another 15 minutes, yelling and pounding, then finally left. I cried, not because I felt sorry for him, but because what I had said was true. The Thomas I thought I knew, the boy I had raised with so much love, no longer existed. Maybe he never really had. On Friday at 5:30 in the morning, the police knocked on Thomas's door. Rebecca notified me by text message. He's been arrested. No resistance. Being transferred to the county facility now. I pictured the scene. Jennifer, his wife, waking to the commotion. The police entering their home. Thomas being handcuffed. The neighbors watching from their windows. The shame. The public humiliation. Exactly what I had felt when I discovered the truth. Jennifer called me 4 hours later, sobbing hysterically. How could you do this to him? To your own son? Ask him what he did to me first, I replied with complete calm. Ask him about the millions he stole, about the forged signatures, about letting me believe my husband was dead while he took everything. He was protecting the family assets. He was protecting his bank account. And now he's going to pay the full price for it. You're a monster. I hung up before she could finish. I blocked her number too. That afternoon, I met Rebecca at her office. She had more documents spread across the conference table. Excellent news. Your son panicked badly. He attempted to wire $750,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands last night. He has an offshore account? He did. Opened it just last week, after you confronted him. He probably sensed you were going to take action. But you said he attempted to transfer the money? Yes, because I had already petitioned the judge to freeze all his accounts preventatively. The transfer was blocked immediately, and now he's being held without bail for attempted capital flight, on top of everything else. How long could he be in prison? With good behavior, 4 years minimum. But considering the sheer number of crimes, the overwhelming evidence we have, the repeated pattern of fraud, he could receive up to 10 years. 10 years. Thomas would be 48 when he was released. And the stores? We've already filed for the nullification of all sales, since they were executed with falsified documents using forged signatures. The transactions are legally void. The buyers will be reimbursed by the banks that brokered the deals, and the properties will return to the correct estate, which would be me and my husband under community property law, 50-50. Correct. Since he's technically deceased, his share is in legal limbo, until we resolve that particular situation. And how exactly are we going to resolve it? Rebecca smiled with genuine satisfaction. She opened a new folder, this one even thicker. I found something extremely interesting. Remember you mentioned that Stephen Carter has a fake birth certificate? Yes. Issued 8 years ago. Well, to obtain a duplicate birth certificate, you need foundational supporting documents. An ID, proof of residence, something legitimate to prove who you are. Your husband used fake documents for that process too. So I tracked down who actually created those documents for him. A forger here in the city named Edward Torres. He's been arrested 3 times for document fraud, but always managed to negotiate plea deals. Rebecca tapped the folder with obvious satisfaction. I spoke with him extensively yesterday. He cooperated fully. I have a signed affidavit from him, confessing that he created all the fake documentation for Stephen Carter at the specific request of Daniel Richard Anderson for a payment of $42,000. I have copies of the original documents he kept as insurance, and I have the bank transfers proving the payment. I felt a shiver of deep satisfaction. It means we can prove beyond any shadow of doubt that Stephen Carter is a completely false identity created by Daniel Richard Anderson. We can invalidate all his documents, all his bank accounts, everything. And we can prosecute him for identity fraud, use of false documents, and embezzlement, despite the fact that he's supposedly dead. But how? If he's legally dead, oh, this is absolutely the best part. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, clearly pleased with herself. We are going to petition for the complete annulment of his death certificate. Since it was issued based on deliberate fraud, a body that wasn't actually his, it's legally null and void. Daniel Richard Anderson never actually died. Therefore, he is legally alive, and as a living person he can be prosecuted, tried, and imprisoned. The full magnitude of what she was explaining hit me like a tidal wave. You're saying he's going to be arrested? I'm saying he's going to be forced to return to being Daniel Richard Anderson. He's going to have to abandon the Stephen Carter identity completely. He's going to have to publicly admit he faked his own death. And then yes, he's definitely going to be arrested for fraud, forgery, and concealment of a body. And Diane, the woman he lives with? I found documentation showing they got married in a civil ceremony 6 years ago as Stephen Carter and Diane Foster. Except that marriage is completely void, because Stephen Carter doesn't legally exist. And Daniel Richard Anderson was already married to you. Technically, he's committed bigamy. Bigamy, another crime for the growing list. Does she know any of this? From everything I've investigated, absolutely not. To her, Stephen is just Stephen, a widower he met and fell in love with years ago. That poor woman is in for a devastating shock. I felt a brief pang of something, pity perhaps, for Diane. She had been deceived in her own terrible way, but the pity passed quickly. She had enjoyed 22 years with my husband. 22 years that belonged to me. When do we execute this plan? I asked. I'm preparing all the paperwork right now. I'll file everything next week. In the meantime, I want you to do something specific. What? Rebecca handed me a thick envelope, a legal notice. I want you to deliver it to your husband personally. In person. Me? Personally? Yes, looking him directly in the eye. I want him to know, with absolute certainty, that it was you who destroyed his comfortable little life. Not a lawyer, not a process server. You. I took the envelope slowly. Inside were multiple pages of dense legal language that essentially said, I know exactly who you are. I know exactly what you did. And now you're going to pay for everything. What if he runs? I've already requested freezes on all his accounts. He has no money to run anywhere. And when the arrest warrant is issued, the police will be actively monitoring him. He's not going anywhere. I left the office holding that envelope like a weapon, because that's exactly what it was. That night I sat alone in the living room with a bottle of red wine, something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I drank slowly, deliberately, savoring each sip, planning carefully. Tomorrow I would drive to the pale yellow house. I would knock firmly on the door, and when Stephen opened it, when he recognized me, when that panic crossed his features, I would smile and hand him the envelope that would systematically destroy everything he had built on the ashes of my pain. Because it was my turn now, my turn to watch him lose everything, my turn to leave him crying, desperate, completely powerless. Exactly as he had left me for 6 agonizing months. Justice was coming. And she had my face. Friday morning, 10 o'clock sharp. I parked the car 4 houses down from the pale yellow house. I picked up the thick envelope from the passenger seat, took 3 long, deep breaths. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from pure anticipation. 43 years had led directly to this moment. I got out of the car, walked slowly down the quiet sidewalk. The morning was warm, the sun already strong. I could hear children playing in a nearby yard, the distant sound of a television through an open window. Normal life continuing as I prepared to completely blow someone's world apart. I stopped in front of the white wooden gate. The Honda Accord was parked in the driveway. He was home. I rang the doorbell firmly, footsteps approaching from inside. The door opened. Diane appeared. The woman I had seen through the window that first terrible day, prettier up close, with a genuinely kind face and curious eyes. Yes? Can I help you? Good morning. I'm looking for Stephen. He's out back, fixing the garden fence. Can I help you with something? I need to speak with him personally. It's extremely important. She hesitated, sizing me up carefully. A well-dressed, polite older woman, nothing obviously threatening. I'll get him. Just one moment. The door closed. I heard muffled voices inside, then heavier footsteps approaching. The door opened again, and there he was. Daniel. My husband. Wearing an old paint-stained t-shirt, faded denim shorts, worn sandals. His gray hair was disheveled, his face sweaty from working, but it was unmistakably him. Our eyes met. I saw immediate recognition flash across his face, followed by shock, then raw fear. Margaret, he whispered, and hearing my name from that mouth after so long felt like being slapped. Hello, Daniel. I smiled, cold and calculated. Or should I call you Stephen? He glanced back nervously to where Diane probably was. Then his eyes returned to me, absolutely desperate. What are you doing here? I came to deliver some mail. I held out the envelope. Legal notice. You need to sign confirming receipt. He didn't take it, just stared at me, pale. How did you find me? It wasn't difficult. You hid yourself poorly. Same city, same habits, same face. Did you actually think I'd never find you? That I'd spend the rest of my life crying at your empty grave? Margaret, I can explain everything. Can you? I laughed without any humor. Are you going to explain how you faked your own death? How you bought the body of a dying man? How you let me bury a complete stranger thinking it was you? How you stole nearly $2 million that was also legally mine? Lower your voice, please, he whispered urgently, looking nervously toward the house. Diane doesn't know? Diane doesn't know what? I raised my voice deliberately and intentionally. Diane doesn't know that Stephen Carter doesn't exist? That you're actually Daniel Richard Anderson, legally married to me for 43 years? The door opened completely. Diane appeared, confused and frightened. Stephen, what's happening? Who is this woman? Daniel closed his eyes, utterly defeated. Claudia, please go back inside. I'm his wife, I answered before he could say anything else. His legal wife, Margaret Anderson. Married to Daniel Richard Anderson since 1982. This man you know as Stephen is my husband. He faked his own death 7 months ago to abandon me and be with you. Diane's face lost all its color instantly. What? What nonsense, Stephen. Tell her this is a lie. Tell her right now. Daniel opened his mouth but absolutely nothing came out. It's not a lie, I continued relentlessly. He has a scar above his right eyebrow from when he crashed a motorcycle at 19. He has a crooked ring finger on his left hand, broken at 16. He has a birthmark on his neck, shaped like a small comma. Should I continue? Or you can verify those marks yourself. I'm sure you know them well. Diane looked at Daniel, desperately waiting for him to deny everything, but he just stood there with his head down. Stephen. Her voice came out broken, shattered. Stephen, look at me. Tell me this isn't true. Diane, please. I can explain. She recoiled as if physically struck. Oh my God. It's true. It's all true. Diane, listen to me. You lied to me. She screamed, and the pain in her voice echoed down the entire street. 22 years. You deceived me for 22 years. Who are you? Who are you really? I'm the same man you've known. You don't even have a real name. Tears poured down her face. Stephen doesn't even exist. You're She couldn't finish, turning and running back into the house, sobbing. Daniel took a step to follow her, but stopped, looking at me with a mixture of anger and complete despair. Are you satisfied now? You've destroyed my life. Your life? My voice came out low. Dangerous. You destroyed mine first, Daniel. 43 years. For 43 years I was your wife. Faithful. Dedicated. Always present. I raised our son essentially alone while you were building another family in secret. I cried at your fake funeral while you were starting over with money that was mine. I was going to leave you the house. A generous allowance, $1,400. I spat the words. You took nearly $2 million and thought $1,400 was generous? I worked for that money. We worked while you ran the stores. Who held everything together at home? Who raised your son? Who gave up everything so you could succeed? Silence. He had absolutely no answer. Take the envelope, I ordered firmly. With trembling hands, he took it, opened it slowly, started reading. I watched his expression change as he went through the pages. Shock, then fear, then pure panic. You're suing me for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, use of false identity, bigamy, and concealment of a body. I've already petitioned for the annulment of your death certificate, I recited calmly from memory. Soon, Daniel Richard Anderson will be officially alive again. And then you'll answer for all of this. Every single crime. I don't have money for an attorney. You should have thought of that before. Oh wait, I smiled. You do have money. Almost $2 million invested in 4 different banks. Except those accounts were frozen yesterday by court order. You don't have access to a single cent. He staggered backward, leaning heavily against the doorframe. Margaret, for the love of God. The love of God. I laughed bitterly. You invoke God's name now? After buying a corpse? After making me cry over an empty grave? After living a complete lie for 22 years? I loved you both. I couldn't choose between you. So you faked your own death. How incredibly brave. From inside the house, we could hear Diane crying loudly, desperate, heartbroken sobs. Oh, and one more thing, I added. Your son is currently in jail. Pre-trial detention for embezzlement, forgery, and attempted capital flight. He tried to wire $750,000 to the Cayman Islands 2 days ago. It didn't work. Daniel turned absolutely white. Thomas? You had Thomas arrested? He got himself arrested when he decided to steal from me. When he forged my signature on 17 different documents. When he sold stores that were half mine without my knowledge or consent. When he let me believe my husband was dead while he pocketed millions. He's your son. And you're my husband, I screamed back. Or you were. Now you're nothing. You're not Stephen, because Stephen doesn't exist. And you're no longer my husband because I'll be annulling this marriage for fraud. What do you want from me, Margaret? He fell to his knees right there on the doorstep. You want to see me completely destroyed? You want revenge? What? I looked down at him. The man I had loved for over 4 decades. The father of my child. Reduced to this. An old man on his knees, begging pathetically. And I felt absolutely nothing. Not pity, not satisfaction, not even anger. Just complete emptiness. I want what's mine, I said with absolute calm. Every cent you stole, with interest and substantial penalties. I want the truth fully exposed. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of man you are. And I want you to face the full consequences of your actions. They're going to arrest me. Prison. Yes, most likely. I'm 71 years old, Margaret. Prison at this age is essentially a death sentence. You should have considered that before. I turned to leave. Margaret, he shouted after me desperately. Margaret, please, for all the years we lived together, for the memory of what we were. I stopped, looked back one final time. The memory of what we were, Daniel? We were never anything real. Because I was genuine, but you were a lie. From beginning to end, you were nothing but a lie. And I walked away. I got in my car, started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw him still on his knees at the door, his head in his hands. Diane appeared behind him, crying, screaming something I couldn't hear. His life, the perfect little life he had built on the foundation of my pain, was crumbling. And I had been the earthquake. I drove home in complete silence, my hands absolutely steady on the wheel. When I arrived, I called Rebecca immediately. I delivered the notice. He fell apart completely. Excellent. Now we simply wait. The arrest warrant will be issued Monday, Tuesday, at the very latest. And the accounts, the money, already being transferred to a judicial trust account. When the process is concluded, you'll receive everything that's rightfully yours. With 7 months of interest, it'll be approximately $2.3 million just from his portion. $2.3 million, plus $1.55 from the stores, plus the house, plus punitive damages. Nearly $4 million total. 43 years were worth almost $4 million. Margaret, are you okay? Rebecca asked gently. I am, I answered honestly. For the first time in a very long time, I'm actually okay. I hung up and went out to the garden. I sat on the bench Daniel had installed years ago, where you could watch the sunset beautifully, and I waited for night to fall, because tomorrow, the sun would rise on a completely new world. A world where I was no longer the weeping widow. I was the woman who had reclaimed her dignity, and I wouldn't apologize for it. The arrest warrant was issued on Monday at 1:45 in the afternoon. Rebecca called me immediately. The police are en route to his house right now. Do you want to go watch? No, I surprised myself with the answer. I don't need to see it. I've already seen enough. I had already witnessed his complete collapse on Friday, on his knees at his doorstep. The rest was just legal formality. But the afternoon still held surprises for me. At 3:30, Jennifer showed up at my door. Thomas's wife. Her eyes were swollen and red, no makeup, clothes disheveled. She looked like she'd aged a decade in just a few days. I came to collect his things, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. His clothes, his personal documents. I need to take them to the attorney. Come in. She entered hesitantly, looking around as if seeing everything for the first time, though she'd been in that house countless times during her 16 years of marriage to Thomas. His things are where they've always been, I said. In his childhood bedroom upstairs. Jennifer went up slowly. I heard drawers opening, closets being searched through. 25 minutes later, she came down carrying 2 large bags. She stopped in the living room, stared at me directly. Are you satisfied now? You've completely destroyed our family. Your family destroyed itself, I replied with complete calm. When you chose to steal from me. He's your son. And yet he stole from me, forged my signature repeatedly, let me mourn a fake death while he pocketed millions. I stood up, walked toward her slowly. Did you know? Did you know about the entire plan? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Thomas told me, after. When it was already done. And you didn't think it was wrong? I did. Of course I did. But what was I supposed to do? Turn in my own husband? I did. Jennifer looked at me with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. You're cold, you know that? Putting your own son in prison. He put himself there. I simply presented the evidence. I moved closer. And you know the difference between you and me, Jennifer? You chose to stay silent when you witnessed an injustice, because it was convenient for you. I chose to fight, even though it hurt terribly. She shook her head, tears streaming. He's going to be in prison for years. Years. And I don't know if I can wait that long. Then don't. You're still young, only 39. You can start completely over. How can you be so practical about everything? Because I spent 43 years being romantic, emotional, believing in family above everything else. And look where it got me. Alone, betrayed, robbed. I won't make that same mistake twice. Jennifer picked up the bags, walked to the door, turned one final time. He loves you, you know. Despite everything, Thomas loves you. Love doesn't steal. I opened the door for her. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't forge documents. What Thomas feels for me isn't love. It's dependency, convenience, maybe guilt. But not love. She left without another word. On Tuesday, I had a completely unexpected visitor. Diane. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, I was genuinely surprised. She looked like she'd been crying for days straight. Swollen eyes, lifeless skin, shoulders slumped in defeat. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I hesitated briefly, then stepped aside. We sat in the living room. I offered coffee. She accepted more out of politeness than actual desire. "I came to return this," she said, taking something from her purse. It was a simple gold wedding band. "His ring, or rather, Stephen's," she laughed bitterly. "I don't even know what to call him anymore." "Daniel," I said. "His name is Daniel Richard Anderson." "Daniel." She tested the name carefully, as if it were completely foreign. 22 years, and I didn't even know his real name. A heavy silence settled between us. "Why did you come here?" I asked directly. "Because I need to understand." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "I need to understand how someone does this, how someone builds an entire life on a foundation of lies, how he could look me in the eye every single day and lie so completely. If you figure it out, please let me know," I answered honestly, "because I don't understand it either. He was arrested yesterday." "Did you know?" "I did. 2 police officers came. In front of all the neighbors, the grandchildren watching. The children cried. They thought their grandpa had done something terrible." "He did. I know." She wiped away fresh tears, "but they don't understand that. To them, he was just grandpa who fixed their bicycles and bought them ice cream every Saturday." I felt a pang of something, not pity for Daniel, but genuine sympathy for the children. They were completely innocent in all of this. "How much did you know about his life before he met you?" I asked. "He said he was a widower, that his wife had died of breast cancer, that he had a son he no longer spoke to because of family disagreements." She let out a humorless laugh. "Even that was a complete lie. His son is very real, and he was involved in the entire scheme. He's in jail too now." Diane nodded slowly, processing everything. "The house we live in is in my name. I bought it before I met him, with money from my inheritance when my mother passed away. At least that's truly mine." "And his money?" "The frozen savings? I can't access any of it, not even to pay for a lawyer for him." She looked at me carefully. "Not that I would at this point. I don't know if I want to help him after discovering all of this. You have every right to protect yourself." "But I loved him." Her voice broke completely. "I really, truly loved him. And now I find out I don't even know who he actually was." I reached out, took her hand gently. 2 women, both deceived by the same man, sitting in the living room he had shared with one, while building another complete life with the other. "I loved him too," I admitted quietly. "For over 40 years, and I don't know who he was either." We sat there for a long while in companionable silence, 2 victims of the same elaborate liar. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Are you going to get the money back? The millions he took?" "I am. The court has already ordered everything returned with interest." "Good." She nodded firmly. "You deserve it. You were with him for much longer than I was. You sacrificed much more. We both sacrificed, just in different ways." She left, leaving the fake wedding band on the coffee table. I picked it up, weighed it in my hand. Another lie, materialized in gold. I threw it in the trash. On Wednesday, Thomas's criminal case moved forward significantly. The prosecutor, Ada Hayes, called to update me. "Your son has accepted a plea agreement." My stomach tightened. What does that mean exactly? "It means he's going to testify fully. Tell us everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'll turn over all documents, recordings, every detail of the entire plan. In return, his sentence could drop from 10 years to 4.5. With good behavior, he could be out in 3. Thomas would be out in 3 years if he cooperated fully." "And Daniel? Your son's testimony is extremely damaging to his father's defense. With all the specific details being exposed, Daniel has virtually no way to deny anything. His sentence could reach 12 years. 12 years. Daniel would be 83 when released. If he was released alive, and you think I should feel sorry for him? I asked. No. I think you should be proud. Women in your situation typically stay silent out of fear, shame, or because their families pressure them. You fought back. And you're winning. Winning. Was that really what I was feeling? Victory? 2 months later, sitting in the first-class cabin of a flight to Madrid, a glass of white wine in my hand, I looked out the window as America disappeared below the clouds. Beside me, Carol and Elizabeth, my childhood friends, were laughing at something on a tablet screen. We were headed for a 30-day Mediterranean cruise. Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece. All the places Daniel had promised to take me, and never did. Now I was going on my own terms. Well, with my friends, but dependent on no man. The stores had been sold for $3.8 million. I invested half in safe, stable funds that provided passive income of $14,000 per month. The other half I set aside for special projects. The first project, I donated $35,000 to a nonprofit organization that helps women who are victims of financial and emotional abuse. Women like me who had been robbed, deceived, and manipulated by their own families. The second project, I bought a small studio space downtown and started sewing again. Not because I needed the money, but because it had been my passion before I gave it up to be just a wife and mother. Now at 67 years old, I was reclaiming who I was before all of this. Daniel had been sentenced to 10 years in prison. With Thomas's detailed testimony in the plea deal, he couldn't get a single day reduced. He was serving his time in a medium security facility. Diane no longer visited him. The grandchildren didn't even really know where he was. The family had invented a story that he'd moved far away. Thomas had been in a minimum security facility for the past 2 months, working in a woodworking shop inside the prison, earning minimum wage. Jennifer had divorced him and was already dating someone new. I visited Thomas once every month. The conversations were still short, still somewhat tense, but he seemed genuinely different, more humble, more self-aware, more reflective. Maybe prison really was changing something fundamental in him. Or maybe it was just my hopeful imagination. Time would reveal the truth. Margaret, are you okay? Carol nudged me gently. You got very quiet all of a sudden. I'm wonderful, I smiled genuinely. Just thinking about how dramatically life can change in such a short time. It changed for the better, Elizabeth said firmly, raising her glass, a toast to our friend who went through hell and back and came out stronger. I don't know if I came back stronger, I reflected carefully, but I came back more aware, more vigilant, more authentically myself. That is being stronger, Carol said, smiling warmly, because strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up after you fall, again and again. We clinked our glasses together. The plane climbed higher, above the clouds, into clear blue sky. And as we rose, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I lost my innocence, my ability to trust blindly, the comforting fantasy that family was sacred by definition. But I gained self-knowledge, true independence, the absolute certainty that I could survive the worst possible betrayal and still choose to live fully, not just exist. 1 year after everything began, I was in my studio, carefully sewing a wedding dress for a client's daughter when Thomas appeared at the door. He had been released on parole 4 weeks earlier. He was noticeably thinner, his hair cut very short, a neatly trimmed beard. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a plain white shirt. Mom, can I come in? You can? He entered slowly, looking around carefully. The studio was small but perfectly comfortable. Dress forms draped in fabric, multiple sewing machines, spools of colorful thread everywhere. My personal space. It's really nice in here. Thank you. What brings you here? He took a deep breath. I came to say goodbye. Goodbye? I'm moving to Denver. I got a job offer in a custom furniture workshop. It's a complete fresh start, far from everything, from everyone here, where nobody knows my story or my past. I understand. And before I left, I needed to thank you for not giving up on me completely, for visiting me in prison, even when I didn't deserve it, for coming with me to scatter Dad's ashes when he died, for giving me this last chance to become someone better. I put my sewing work aside carefully, stood up. Thomas, I didn't give you any chances. You're the one building this new life, with hard work, with different choices, with genuine humility. That's entirely on you. Even so, you could have abandoned me completely. And you didn't, because I'm your mother. And mothers don't abandon their children, but they also don't cover up their crimes or enable their bad behavior. That's been my biggest lesson this entire year. True love means letting a person face the full consequences of their actions and learn from them. He nodded, his eyes welling with tears. I'm going to make it work in Denver. I'm going to rebuild my life completely from scratch. And one day, I'm going to make you proud of me again. I'm already proud of the man you're trying to become. He approached hesitantly. I opened my arms, and for the first time in over a year, I hugged my son genuinely. Not a formal embrace, but a real mother's hug. When he left, carrying only a single suitcase and an uncertain future, I stood at the studio door watching him walk away down the street, and I realized I had achieved something rare and precious. I had transformed deep pain into genuine growth, betrayal into hard-won wisdom, devastating loss into a powerful new beginning. Today, 3 years after seeing Daniel alive in that grocery store, I wake up every morning in my home, go to my studio, create my designs, have coffee and long conversations with my friends. I have $14,000 monthly in passive income. My studio brings in another $7,000. I don't need anything or anyone to survive. Thomas calls me every single week from Denver. He's in a serious relationship with a woman there. Honest, hardworking, genuine. He says one day he wants me to meet her. Maybe I'll visit. Or maybe I'll invite them here. I never returned to Daniel's burial plot after discovering the truth. I had a simple plaque installed on it that reads, "Here lies a stranger. May he find peace," because that tomb was never really my husband's. It was my innocence, my naivete, my blind trust. And that deserved to rest in peace. Sometimes, when I'm sewing late into the evening, I think about everything that happened. And I ask myself, was it worth it? Destroying my family, putting my son in prison, publicly exposing all that private pain? And the answer is always the same. Yes, because I learned that dignity is absolutely non-negotiable. That respect isn't something you beg for or compromise on. That self-love is worth infinitely more than any family tie built on elaborate lies. I learned that it's never too late to demand justice. That being 67 years old doesn't mean you have to accept everything quietly, passively, without fighting back. And most importantly, I learned that the best possible revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's rebuilding yourself stronger, freer, more authentically yourself than ever before. That is true victory. That is real justice. And that is exactly what I did.